Okay, well, good morning everyone, and certainly I'd like to say thank you to the hosts for inviting me to attend this event. Seems a very positive event, and great to see some new faces talking about decontamination. So my job as an authorised engineer, decontamination, I work in NHS Wales. However, this is a personal interpretation and nothing to do with any policies of my employer. Any photographs that are in this presentation are strictly confidential, albeit one or two people here may recognise one or two photographs. So quality. Anybody know what quality is? And it's not a brand of sherry. QC, quality counts. Okay. Quality is a degree to which an object or entity satisfies a specific set of attributes or requirements. Does anybody know in decontamination what type of attributes that may be? This gentleman here. No? Does that help you out at all? Standards, regulations? Can you give me an example of a standard? No? A regulation? Yeah, COSH, pressure vessels. There's a host, isn't it? All related to decontamination, sterilisation, etc. Sorry to put you on the spot, but wakes you up. Okay, so if we look at quality systems, there needs to be a 360-degree loop. Okay? Helen talked about decontamination departments. It's not all about the department. There are other parts of the actual loop that we need to make sure we are doing things correctly. An acronym I'm going to use during this presentation, which we talked about last night in a discussion about the military, ATD. Can you tell me what that means? ATD, attention to detail, okay? But if you think of some of these particular items on the fishbone, if we think of places, where do we think the places are? Everybody's looking frightened now, they don't know eyeball me. Places could be your sterile service department. What about the engineering? Does any of you go in there to have a look at what's going on? I don't know whether there's engineers in the room, but, you know, some of you may be key auditors. Do you ever go outside of the decontamination facility? And we'll come back to it with one or two photographs later. So we've got to get everything right here. An SSD goes to a lot of trouble to decontaminate an instrument set. A lot of money, a lot of problems, a lot of accountability goes into that. He goes to theatre. What happens there with the storage? I was in one particular department, a surgeon came in, he picked it up and off he went. He took the set to a private hospital. It was decontaminated by an NHS facility, right or wrong. He picked it up like that, all the instruments fell downwards. Lack of attention for detail. He shouldn't be doing it in the first place. So, to check our quality systems, we have routine audits, okay? And an audit is a process used by professionals to assess quality. Years ago, when I started, I'd never heard of this, compliance. Now it's all about compliance. Huge compliance departments have been set up. Cost a fortune. But it's making sure we're adhering to guidance. Does this help maintain quality and standards? What do we think? Who thinks audit is beneficial? That gentleman over there. Why? Pardon?
You get to see things at the sharp end you don't usually get to see.
Yeah, I don't disagree. However, there are a couple of factors that I think we need to consider. I don't disagree with you. Okay. So, this lady by here with a pen in her mouth. Can you give me an example of a pioneer that developed healthcare audit? And I don't mean BSI, SGS, or Joe Blogg's decontamination consultancy. Any idea? Anybody know who this lady is? Florence Nightingale, okay? And she was around in the Crimean War, and she was appalled at some of the conditions they were using to treat soldiers back in those days. And she started to look at what they were doing, reviewing statistics, okay? Keeping meticulous records with now developing quality systems. And she looked at changes to the regimes of care, audit, monitoring what they were doing, review, and they found mortality rates fell from 40 to 2%. So that's a very basic and a very early systematic audit. Audits can help us meet objectives. However, they have to be done correctly, and they can have disastrous consequences if they are ignored. Not all audits are successful, and I'll come to that later, for a variety of reasons. If we're an auditor, we have to be shark with teeth. We can't be toothless sharks. We're doing it for a purpose. And we, as auditors, must learn. Graham and I, we developed an audit tool for endoscopy facilities. I feel it in far more concise now than I did 5 years ago, because I've learned. I've seen so many things, and you've seen so many bad things. You've seen good things as well. You learn and you adapt. We improve, we evolve, okay? And that's at all levels. Encourage communication with all the stakeholders. Helen talked about that earlier. How many of you talk to your decontamination lead? Nobody. Good grief. One or two. So there's a communication problem. How many of you talk to this person? You're the AED. How many of you actually know an AED? How many of you see the AED? There's a couple in the room here today. Yeah? Use them. They're there for a purpose. Your infection prevention control team. How many of them actually understand decontamination? Well, some of them, they're all trained to a very high standard, but they may not understand our field. With the war environment, they may understand everything, but ATD. So it's important that we realise with the audit cycle, okay, points 3, 4 and 5 are critical. Measuring level of performance, making improvements and sustaining improvements. Okay? It's no good spending £5 million on a new department today and then letting it rot. We have to sustain our level and our quality. Here's an example of an audit that went catastrophically wrong. Grenfell, 72 fatalities. A fire safety audit identified a number of core building failures. Those failures were never rectified, and the consequences were catastrophic. How many of you remember this? A lot of younger people in the room, some old dogs, like myself and Graham. Is that correct, Graham? So, this was an incident, 167 fatalities. Could it have been avoided? Well, we don't know. However, the ability to contain certainly could have been prevented. 1983, a technical audit identified firefighting pumps should be left in automatic mode. At the time of the incident, they were left in manual mode, so the fire kicked off and the firefighting teams could not get to the firefighting equipment. Do we have that in decontamination? Potentially. So does audit guarantee quality during Normal operation. Now, validation engineers, how many of them in the room? None. Yes, Andrew. Andrew, have you ever had a cup of coffee in a washroom or a laboratory? Have you? Well, I know I have. Graham, have you? Yes. Quality when nobody's looking. But we, I'm not saying it's right, it's totally wrong, but we've done it. Henry Ford, quality means doing it right when no one is looking. And I think this is what you guys, as management teams, as support services, you need to make sure happens. Do we have a problem? Well, we're audited to death, aren't we? Why is that blinking so-and-so coming along auditing me again? We never compromise quality. We always undertake our audits and they're always done to the right standard. Is that correct? So, why audits fail? Tick box. We audit just for the sake of it. We don't do anything with it. We come round the department, we have a cup of coffee with the manager. Oh yeah, nice day, did you watch the rugby on the weekend? We'll come back to that. If we give it to a junior member of staff, they may not have the correct knowledge base. Remote audits, what is that about? How many of you had remote audits? How can you have a remote audit? The best audit tools are these. You go and find out what's going on. And the perception that an audit will give us a happy ending. It tells us that everything is hunky-dory. Lack of independence. So, we go back to IPC. The IPC team come round. We all went out for an Indian meal last Friday. Our Betty. Oh, I can't criticise him or her. You're there in a professional capacity. What you do outside of work, friendship's got nothing to do with it. You have to audit against standards and regulations or a specified audit tool. We can't have any influence. We can't have conflicts of interest. That may be friendship, contractual conflicts, etc. People prepare for audits. How many of you have gone through audits a couple of days before? You're throwing everything out. You're cleaning the store areas up. Getting the Christmas decorations out of the IAP room. It happens. We've seen it. But who is responsible for quality? This lady here. Who's responsible for quality? Everyone. Top of the class. The amount of times you go to a department, we've always done it this way. We've never had a problem. We know best. We know our department. But do we? We talked about those external stakeholders. They've all got something to add. They've all got something that can benefit you guys at the front line. There's my neighbour there. That was half-time during the rugby match on the weekend. But we came back and there was a point in it at the end. So all ended well. So this is what we see when we go to have a look at audits. I talk about theatre storage. Good or bad? Yeah? Good or bad? Instrument quality. Look at that. Corrosion. Instrument banding. How do we clean that? Loading of a washer disinfector. Shadowing. How do we clean that? If you think of this, bare plaster in a washroom. Come on, put some paint on it. That's probably like that for a 12-month. A washroom. Ceiling tile missing. Fan blowing contaminated aerosols all across the washroom. Beautiful. Spreading all sorts. This one's an interesting one. This is in an IAP room. Okay? And they had an escalation. Our ventilation plant isn't performing in accordance to HBN 13. So we're not achieving the air changes. We can't achieve a positive pressure. How the hell are you going to achieve a positive pressure with a great big hole in the ceiling? Yeah? And this, a lubrication station I said that in the audit, we couldn't stop laughing, but that's another issue. Lubrication station. If you look in HBN 13, it says if you've got a lubrication station in the IAP room, it should be contained. So they're lubricating the devices, spraying this, that, and the next thing. Again, Class 8 clean room, and we are spreading contaminated lubricant all around the area. This is a feed water container for steam generation. Water should be of a certain quality. What's growing there? Engineering team, too lazy to repair the leak. They've developed this contraption. Probably more time went into that than repairing the leak. Safety valve, steam safety valve, blowing away to its hard content. And this is a sterilising plant room. Okay? Now with the plant room, you look at HBN 13, temperatures should be below 30 degrees, it should be clean, sealed, etc. Open to the elements. Rats, pigeons, everything can fly into our sterilisation loading area. We are trying to prepare sterile instrument sets. And any creature can make its way in. Electrical safety, exposed light fitting, bare cables on a washer disinfector, waiting to kill somebody. Again, bare cables up there. And this is a community facility. Why isn't this picked up on a day-to-day basis? That is in one of the core treatment areas. What's happened there, somebody's too lazy to raise the maintenance sheet. Again, a leak off a steriliser, contain it in the bin, it'll be okay till next week. What happened? The bin filled up, migrated into the department below, brought the tiles down, nice Inco sheet to collect the moisture. Okay, this is what we see on a daily basis. Now this, old beauty, does anybody remember the Cheeser system for decontamination of endoscopes? The system had its presses. The downside was single point of failure. These cassettes, they did crack and split from time to time. So you had to replace them at quite a considerable cost. However, this particular department, we're not going to repair that. So they've devised a way to stop the leak. A nicely constructed wedge, medical device classified. And when you go there, water leaking out. So, now we talked about engineering support services. Ventilation plant, bag filters collapsed. Okay, they've all collapsed. So we got our air blowing into our Class 8 clean room. It's bypassed the filters. That's not uncommon with theatres as well. Chilling unit, all clogged up with dust, and the same for the vent in the plant room. Can you see this one? What sort of hazard do you think we have there? So we've got a cleaning sink, and I think this was something like a cardiac department. So they were cleaning the scope in there, filling it up, water, but it was a bit warm in the room, okay? So I've got to cool myself down. I'll put a fan in there. They're looking to kill themselves, aren't they? Again, ventilation problems, lack of attention from a state or a service provider, rust, corrosion, endoscopy facility. Again, you look at the HTMs, ventilation rates are defined. How can we achieve ventilation rates with this? With all the local flies and wasps coming in for a get-together. Ventilated storage cabinet, peracetic acid. Yeah? In all fairness, they've given it a bit of thought. They've cut a vent hole, didn't they? But it's not exactly mechanically ventilated, is it? IPC, wash hand basin, waste by the side of it. Look at the fire door. Can you see the rope holding it closed? You remember this one, Graham. I think you were involved with this. Lab care. Yeah? And this old beauty, this is a community dental facility. Again, wash sink. What have we got there? Can you see it? Yorkshire tea. So it goes nice with some protein from the cleaning process below. So, as healthcare practitioners, do we think this lack of attention for detail is killing anybody? It's got the potential, yeah, I agree. But you speak to some of our clinical friends and they say, it's fine, the risks are no more than a knife and fork. You go to a restaurant, they use a validated washer disinfector. So, a couple of examples where we've had fatalities over the years through poor decontamination and sterilisation practices. So, there's a couple of common denominators here. The more we contradict the standards, the greater the risk, okay? So if we think of some of the examples that I've shown, you add one or two of those together and there's a potential for something catastrophic. Many of the issues that have been escalated have been highlighted previous in various audits, action plans, etc. But again, that goes back to the initial, an audit is only as successful as the action plan that's being implemented. Some of these examples are within accredited departments. So what's going on there when they're undergoing their audits? Why aren't people picking this up? Are they example of poor teamwork, leadership and culture? You know, are people not communicating? One thing I take from some of these, and you're looking at an audit, perhaps the escalation isn't going up high enough. Perhaps we need to really take it up to people at board level, because if people at that middle tier aren't going to resolve, perhaps we've got to go to the next step. And that can be a little controversial. So we need to change a culture and ensure quality is there day in, day out. Andrew, there's no cups of coffee in the sterilisation area, okay? Because I know you, I've seen you do it. Quality must be maintained at all times, okay? It's not just for audit. We go back to that 360-degree life cycle. Education, support is all part of that for all stakeholders, okay? And that's not just the people undertaking decontamination. That could be clinical partners, estates partners, support services, etc. Leadership is essential, okay? We need to embrace that and try and get everybody together. Helen talked about strategic groups. Well, they've got to be open and they've got to allow people to talk about their problems when they're there. Motivation of all stakeholders is essential. And this is something I see nowadays. Motivation can be a bit of an issue. We've got to motivate APDs. Okay? It's a funny one, this APD role, but involve them, use them, and try and motivate them to support you. IPC, if you've got those, use them, bring them in. Famous colleague that I worked with, she used to come in, the first thing she'd do, go above the door, put her hand, dust, and that was an indication how good or bad the audit would be. And it's not all about money, okay? Some of those issues that we talked about there can be quite easily resolved. Too many times, the action plan's going to cost a hell of a lot of money to implement. Not the case. We looked at that bare wall in that one washroom. A bit of paint, a bit of ATD. That's all it needs, okay? We can all influence quality, all the way from the basic cleaners, all the way up to the chief execs. It's too easy to say, we can't do anything with this department, we need a £25 million new department. But that's not always the case. Sometimes what you got is okay, but it just needs that TLC. Don't leave it rot. Quality is not an act, it is a habit. Thank you very much.